1270 AM, 102.3 FM, WMKT, Northern Michigan.
Empowerment Evaluation, the Digital Villages, Hewlett-Packard's $15 million race towards social justice. David M. Fetterman, author, on the phone with us this morning. David, good morning to you, sir.
Good morning, Vic. Thanks for having me.
Where are you this fine morning?
California. Sunny, warm, a little different than Michigan.
I don't remember asking, David. Keep it to yourself. If you're out of an area where it's really nice weather, keep it to yourself. Whereabouts in California? In SoCal or NoCal?
San Jose, so Northern California.
Oh, boy.
I've been at Stanford for a lot of years.
Do you know the way? Where did you go to school?
Stanford.
Oh, you're a Cardinal then.
Yeah, it's a nice place.
Which Cardinal were you? Were you the Bird? Were you the Cardinals? Because they've changed that a few times.
Yeah.
Now it's just color.
Yeah, now it's just the color. They just changed it over the years.
Did you, at Stanford, ever have a run-in with the tree?
I not face-to-face, although when my kid was in daycare, at the Stanford daycare, I actually got to meet one of the many trees that they have. They're pretty crazy. There's no question about it. The whole band is pretty wild.
Yeah. The tree is great.
Yeah, pretty impressive. And big.
Empowerment Evaluation of the Digital Villages, what is this all about?
This is an interesting experience. It was a comprehensive community-wide initiative that was funded at $15 million, a lot of money for this thing, by HP, to help people bridge the digital divide, particularly in communities of color throughout the United States. And they had amazing success in certain areas, and we assessed it, and some were just reasonably successful, and some had some problems, but they turned it around. But I should say one of them is called the Tribal Digital Village in San Diego. It's made of 18 or 19 different tribes that got together, and they built one of the largest wireless systems in the country to communicate within the reservation where it was all broken up before, and outside. They even communicated with me in my class at Stanford, with my students, so they could show how, if you use this feedback mechanism called empowerment evaluation, where you're constantly monitoring what you're doing and assessing what you're doing to see if you're accomplishing your goals, they use this system to be able to accomplish all of their key objectives. And so much so that the head of the SEC at the time was impressed and mentioned it on the radio before I even knew about it, while I was driving up to a different project up in Oakland. So some of them were very, very impressive. Other ones gave out laptops to teachers and to students and families. And they did that as a way to transform the curriculum, not just to give away laptops. That's what they did in East Palo Alto and in Baltimore. So it's a pretty impressive community initiative, but mostly it shows what folks can do on their own with assistance, and how resilient they can be, even though they are way behind in the digital age, as it were.
All right, you talk in Chapter 3 about the 3 digital villages. What are those 3?
Those are the ones like in San Diego called the Tribal Digital Village. That'd be like 18 different tribes that pulled together. And keep in mind, many of them had conflicts in the past for all sorts of different reasons, but we found common denominators using empowerment evaluation to say, what are we all interested in working on together? Another one was East Palo Alto as a digital village. Another one was in Baltimore. And they all had sort of a different kind of tone, different kind of background, and slightly different goals. They all had to be under the umbrella of some sort of technology, because HP was supporting that kind of effort to help them bridge that digital divide in each of these communities.
Now, what is empowerment evaluation? Just those 2 words, the concept.
Yeah, it's when I was president of the American Evaluation Association, I presented it as my presidential address, and it was new to the field. It basically is normal evaluation where you're assessing the merit and worth of things out there, but you turn it upside down on its head. So instead of me as the expert being in charge of all of it, you're in charge as the part of the community, and I'm a coach and facilitator. And it basically is helping people learn how to monitor and assess their performance so they can reach their objectives, their dreams. I work also in tobacco prevention in Arkansas, and we work with churches and hospitals and you name it. And we find common denominators like getting kids to stop smoking, and we have established, what is your goal? I want to have maybe, 10 smoke-free parks. Well, great. where do you expect to be the first quarter, halfway through, three-quarters way through, so they can monitor with these benchmarks where they are. If they're not making it, instead of a slap on the wrist, it's some other partner who's doing really well, getting smoke-free parks. What are you doing to do that? Same thing in the digital village. What are you doing? So instead of it being competitive, it's how do you help each other? And then if we don't have the resources, how do we go to other folks like HP and others that have all sorts of experts, not just money? So it's a whole process of self-assessment.
Now, you talk about the drivers and the engine and the starting line. What's the assessment, the evaluation on where you are with all this right now? How successful is it? What, goals haven't been reached yet and so forth?
Yeah. It's interesting that you ask. Let me give you three real quick ones if I could. The first one, as I mentioned before, for the Tribal Digital Village was a tremendous success because they were able to build one of the largest wireless systems in the country, and that's from the ground up. They didn't really care about computers, and they helped establish, get the routers in shape. They built the towers. They got the whole bit going so they can communicate. Now remember, many years ago, when the earlier version of the Bureau of Indian Affairs fragmented Native Americans on the reservation so they couldn't communicate with each other. So this enhanced their ability to communicate and work together on the reservation. But then, as I said, they can also communicate outside the rest of the world to improve employment, education, you name it. And as I said, they were connecting with my class at Stanford, which was kind of cool. They showed my students it's really working. They also also established a digital printing press to be able to make money that way instead of just casinos. Same thing in East Palo Alto. They moved in a different direction. They moved more towards disseminating laptops and getting the curriculum revised and focused more on what's on the net, that sort of thing. And same thing in Baltimore.
Now, when you talk about a Wi-Fi digital village, what's different about that than just being on the internet together?
It's basically that they're making it a sustainable entity that they can sell part of the bandwidth. They can also communicate effectively as a neighborhood, as a community. It brought together tribes that didn't necessarily communicate very well with each other for a lot of different cultural baggage reasons. All of these communities I work with, what I'm trying to do is not make everybody buddies and everything's wonderful, but what's the common denominator that folks are interested in moving on together to improve their lives? So that's what they did, more of that kind of approach to be more sustainable rather than just being on the net independently looking at things. What can they do as a community? Because the whole idea is it's a collaborative activity that lasts longer than the actual funding. Because the whole point of it is once you bring a group together, instead of just looking at the net individually and seeing what's going on, if you bring them together and they're used to working as a group, they can do that same process and same self-assessment well beyond the actual initial funding of a particular project.
Between East Palo Alto, East Baltimore, and San Diego, which of those areas is performing better?
Good question.
Or is that possible to evaluate?
It is. I mean, if you have them in a scale, I'd say San Diego, the Tribal Digital Village definitely did the best. I mean, to build one of the largest wireless systems in the country, hard to beat that, not to mention a digital printing press. East Palo Alto, very impressive to help reshape the curriculum, but, not quite as powerful or as noteworthy from the external kind of standards, like the FCC, for example. Interestingly that you mentioned that because the Baltimore one did very well, but they took a long time to get sort of their act together. And in fact, this is pretty amazing. So I'm very honest in this appraisal. We're very straightforward about all this stuff, about what worked and what didn't. They turned away HP. They disinvited their host at one point. That's like unheard of. And now HP took it very well. HP said, okay, you don't want us in there to take a look at what you're doing right now, probably because you don't want to waste our time, you're not ready, etc. And that was very nice. That was a very respectful way to go, but probably the wrong move. They probably said, wherever you are, let's see where you are, and we can help wherever you are to move you forward, because it created sort of an arrogance that they didn't need anybody, and they could disinvite key players, which meant they turned away other forms of resources. So I would say then when they finally got that awakening and they invited us, the Department Evaluators and my team over there, with the understanding that we wouldn't say anything to HP until they were ready, and HP was okay with that, then they started waking up to the fact that they better pull together as a group and start establishing goals and start monitoring those things. Otherwise, they're not going to make it. And they turned it around just in time to be able to get there. But it put them behind if you were to assess what's the top, what's the middle, and what's the third level as far as overall accomplishments.
What would be or what was the motivation to disinvite Hewlett-Packard in this?
It was interesting. Everyone was a little worried. Why would you do that? Because it's considered a pretty big faux pas to, basically slap your host in the face and say you can't come. But in essence, when you really found out what was going on, and they let us in to talk because we were very straightforward, very helpful. We do this as our job throughout the United States and through the world. We're invited to help assess where communities are going. We realized they sincerely were not ready. They were so far behind. They hadn't pulled themselves together as a group and identified themselves sufficiently as a collaborative. As a consequence, they were sort of still competing with each other as small units, and they hadn't made the progress. In other words, some of the laptops were still in the stores, or still being held back at HP, and instead of being in the schools. Now, having said that, way back when some of these things occurred initially, it wasn't entirely their fault. That's when HP had merged with Compaq. Remember, they had taken that in.
Yeah.
And that was, it ended up being great at the end, but a fiasco initially. It slowed down all sorts of production, including distribution of the laptops to these grantees, to this group in Baltimore in particular. So when you studied up the ladder, you found out that there are all sorts of ripple effects if you study way up rather than just see what happens on the ground. So once that got unraveled and straightened out, things moved along a lot more smoothly.
Is there a ceiling for this? I mean, is there only so much, or is it fairly infinite? If there's a chance that something like that exists.
It's infinite. I mean, I do this all around the world. People invite me to Japan, to Nepal, Australia, New Zealand. I get invited to all sorts of places, and throughout the United States, to give talks on this, to do workshops, and to do the actual evaluation, but in a collaborative way. I think a lot of foundations were on board right away. The Obama administration is doing this with their neighborhood revitalization work through the White House Domestic Policy Council. We have the MacArthur Foundation doing sustainable communities. We have all sorts of folks, Annie Casey. There are a lot of folks on board. I think, it's one of these things that are just the right time. I think people are disenchanted with just being told what's the right way to go from external experts that really are very bright, but they have no idea where the community is in terms of their developmental cycle. And as a consequence, they're less trusting. And they're looking for someone who can be honest, straightforward, what's called a critical friend, to help them move forward. Still critical, a pain in the neck about you're not making it here, what's going on, but also giving suggestions about how to move forward to accomplish those goals. So they're inviting folks like us, evaluators that do empowerment or collaborative forms of evaluation or participatory forms, to come in there and help work together as a partner. It's more of a hand up rather than a hand out, so that you don't build that dependency. You actually are building self-determination with the community and letting them, because if they can do this, they can then move on without your help or as much help as you move forward. It just changes the whole dynamic of the relationship.
In Chapter 10, you talk about reflections of the race towards social justice. What have we learned? What is the social justice? What is that definition? What does that look like?
Basically, it's when you have, in this case, three major communities of color and their different backgrounds actually becoming more in control of their own lives instead of being dependent on, handouts or anything of that nature. They're learning how to build sustainable businesses in many cases, improve their educational programs, and also improve their health because of the access to information and people. Resources, and that is trying to make things more equitable, where they actually have a say in their own lives and move forward and are more self-sustaining, rather than sticking with the same inequities we have that have gotten people, in this case, further and further behind in a digital age which you cannot afford to even stand still. It moves so fast, as we all know. So to be disenfranchised from it and then have your children not part of that is putting them behind the game as well. So in this case, bridging the digital divide, or at least contributing to that, has made a gigantic difference because they haven't had to go through the same step-by-step process. They could leapfrog and go to where we are now and then move forward. So it saves a lot of time, and that's what social justice and equity is really about, is making it a little more fair around the whole table for all different groups. Let me add one other quick thing, if I could.
You bet.
One thing I've learned is that a lot of people say, how do you get all these folks, together? Well, in East Palo Alto, for example, I have African Americans who don't get along with Latinos, and Latinos who don't get along with Pacific Islanders. Just to be very concrete about this, I tell them, I'm not here to make everybody friends and buddies, etc. All I want to know is, how many of you want to work on improving education? And you see a lot of hands go up all across the board. How many on security, because it's not the most safe place in the world? Yep, a lot of hands. Housing? No. You know what? Then we're not going to work on housing right now. Maybe down the road, but we're going to work on security and education, because that's the common vested interest. I work on, I invite people to death. I want as many people as possible, inclusion like crazy. But at a certain point I go, you know what? If you're not here at the table, your voice will not be heard. The whole point of this is to get your vested interest on the table. I want to know your biases, what you want to know from your group, whether it's an ethnic group, a religious group, whatever it may be. And let's put it on the table. And you know what? If we can find common denominators, other folks interested in the same thing, no matter what their background, we can move forward. That's like the biggest message I get across to folks. It's really helping to facilitate that common vested interest and then move forward on that.
David Fetterman, Empowerment Evaluation in the Digital Villages. Where can we find you on the World Wide Web?
Just check my name, David Fetterman, David, and then Fetterman. And you'll see my webpage. Tons of free resources I have, videos of what we do internationally and domestically. I did a piece for the Chronicle of Philanthropy just a week or two ago. I called In These Uncertain Times, trying to help nonprofits know what to do as a survival plan given the fiscal cliff and all the other financial cuts. So you can see me on the web all over. And we have also lectures that are very brief. We have videos of our work internationally, as I said, that you can see as well. But go to that homepage, davidfetterman.com, and you'll see all of these different kinds of materials. And feel free to contact us. We're happy to help you start learning how to assess your own programs and move forward and accomplish your own objectives.
David, thank you very much. Great stuff. I appreciate your time this morning.
Thank you. Keep up the good work. I've been listening to your show as well. Very nice to hear.
Thank you very much. I appreciate that. All right, folks, we're going to go to break. The rain continues. Man, I'm going to have to build an ark. We'll be back.
Vic McCarty, live and local.